And then Irina and I are, getting out of San Francisco basically every weekend or so. It's just been like so apparent these days that San Francisco is just a pit of anxiety. I
Mm,
mean, it's like, just to be able to exist here, financially, there's a lot of pressure. The main industry of San Francisco is small businesses. So you're every day you wake up, you're overwhelmed with friction, just trying to bring something into the world that has previously not existed. You have just mental instability from top to bottom, whether it's like people on the sidewalks or CEOs or whatever. I mean, everybody's just like white knuckling it through the place, and
mm.
even just driving is a pain in the ass here. Just people are on edge all the
Yeah,
time, and it's
and
so
laugh.
it's so different than when I first moved here. I've been here for 17 years. I've been in and out of the city for my entire life. It's been three generations of my family basically being in San Francisco. And it used to be the stereotype was, before I think like 2008 when the tech stuff really took off, it was always like there was San Francisco and New York. And it's like if you wanted to go like advance your career, go crush it, go put in a bunch of energy, you go to New York where everything's happening and you just grind, you grind for a few years to get yourself established. And that as soon as you let up on the energy, there's somebody climbing up your ankles, on the backside that's going to push you down. And if you want that kind of energy, that's where you go. You go to New York. And San Francisco was always like, you just kind of, it's a higher quality of life. You can kind of, chill. You can put your energy into creative things. It's culturally satisfying. But, it wasn't all about grinding and waking up every day where you're, having to push, just push, push, push. And
Yeah.
then when tech came in, all
Yep.
of that changed. And now it's like, I think it's even more grindy than New York
Yeah.
because New York's at least like big enough that you can kind of get lost in these other niches and you can find other interests and kind of exist on these different like parallel realities. You can find satisfaction in San Francisco. There just is none of that. There's something like 820,000 people here as opposed to 8 million in New York. And it's just the energy is overwhelmingly anxious to me. And it took me a long time to realize that that's what was going on. And so, Irina lives down in Lake Merced where it's pretty chill. You can actually hear the birds chirping and like you don't hear traffic. It's like pretty relaxed. And then we've been trying to get away, every weekend just to be able to reset. But it's kind of been, a big wake up call to realize like, running your own business, having this commercial enterprise, like trying to live your dream. It's amazing that you can do it here, but to be able to do it, you have to spread yourself so thin along so many different lines. I mean, just learning the software tools that are necessary to be able to run your business efficiently is like, like I thought being an artist was making art. Turns out it's only 20% of the endeavor, It's like 80% grind, 80%, CEO stuff. And it's just like, wow, like it's wild. It kind of snuck up on me, this realization. And now it's like, you know, like I think that being an artist and doing the large scale public art like I'm doing, like I'm best suited to be here. But now I am looking for this like parallel reality of like, a weekend house, maybe like up in
Yeah.
Grass Valley or, north of San Rafael or somewhere. Cause I mean, the peninsula is just, there's nothing. East Bay is not an option. Um, and so I am starting to think, you know, that that's what I need to be building towards. But then that means accelerating the business into like I'm already like doing well by artist standards, like I'm in kind of the top percentage. But as far as somebody running a business in San Francisco, like I'm lower middle. like, and the overhead of just doing business in California is so brutal that if I'm going to get to a place where I can actually start accumulating like wealth and prosperity, I probably have to 2 to 3x what I'm doing right now. And then I'm just looking at this, existing in this anxiety of the city and just this overall vibe of just like, every time you go outside, it's like, who's screaming? Who's yelling? Who am I stepping over? Like, is that a pile of human shit or dog shit? Is that needle? Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, and then I gotta know, and then I know that I gotta go even harder into that to be able to get to this level where I'm like, okay, now I have enough people and that can work with me and systems in place that now I can scale up with relatively little friction. Like to go from 0 to here is maximum friction. To go from 100 to 300, or whatever it is, whatever the metric is percentage wise, um, it's going to be easy. And then to go to 300 to 1,000 is easier. And then 1,000 to 10, you know what I mean? It's like it just exponentially, like once you hit that curve, it kind of, the friction shifts. So I'm trying to figure all that out, and I know that that's something that you looked at and you're really ahead of the curve on, and in some degree, one of the things that motivated you to move to Texas, and I don't know, what's your read on that, and how it is that we're being positioned from an entrepreneurial standpoint and a business standpoint, in like Bay Area versus Texas versus like what's going on with technology right now? Like, any insights into that?
You've just got to move to Austin. San Francisco is a shithole. California is a failed state. It's an anxiety-ridden far leftist culture that's just
Yeah.
toxic, and the state is completely falling apart, and you should just get out of there as fast as possible.
Well, dude, the taxes. I just met with my CPA and I looked at what how I'm funding the demise of San Francisco through how, I, how I'm actually like paying for everything to fall apart. Um, no, I mean, it is. It's brutal. It's just, I'm 47 and I can't start over. And I mean, I could, but it's like the old adage. It's like it's better to have the devil that you know than the devil you don't know. And so much of my business is based off of like, relationships, my network, the name recognition that I have, and previous clients that, it's there does need to be an exit plan for sure, but I don't know what that's going to look like exactly. And now that I've kind of, I'm getting my team together on a new level, there is a possibility that I might be able to generate enough or cultivate enough help to be able to catapult myself beyond, this friction points that I'm at right now. But I will say one thing that I was thinking about that I want to get your opinion on is, um it does feel like this is all not even politically driven, but ideologically driven in the same way
Yeah.
that, Breitbart says that politics are downstream of culture.
Yep.
And culturally in San Francisco, you've had this kind of leftist supermajority for the last 40 years with no meaningful opposition. And so, the left has really been able to do whatever it is that they want to do. They've had more money than any other city government and
Yeah.
the whatever they have no meaningful resistance. All right. And so, when you look at that from a first principle standpoint, you're like, okay, well, what is the primary attribute of progressivism? It's psychologically, it's openness, right? So you're like, okay, the world has changed, the reality is here. In order to be able to include everybody's ideas, you have to be more and more and more open. And then conservatives are like, no, 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 you can't have everything be open because not everybody's invited to the dinner table. Not everybody's going to be your friend. Not everybody gets to be in your community. You have to say like, you know, I I'm not dating everybody in the world. Like I'm only with my girlfriend. And that's primarily a relationship of saying yes to the love that's opening up between her and I, but it's saying no to the rest of the world so that I can cultivate. It's almost like psychological property rights. It's like I have to defend my territory because I can't let infinite possibilities in. I'm a finite being. I only have a limited amount of time, limited amount of energy, and a limited amount of like knowledge. So I can only take on my local area. I can only cultivate the garden of what I can touch. Okay. So when progressivism really had its heyday was in two moments in the late 1800s and in the early 60s, right? So in the late 1800s, during the progressive era, going all the way up to whatever it was, 1917, 1920, or whatever, there was this time when capitalism just took over. The people at the top understood the dynamics of how to have like basically population capture, and they allowed people that were starving to come work for them in these horrible factory conditions. There was no weekends, there was no health care, there was no child labor laws, there was no, like, people were being ground down into a pulp.
Yeah.
And so the progressives, they came in and they said, no, we can't have this one idea. We have to have, the values that more people are aligned with. You don't just have this robot, you have an actual human being. And in order to be able to accommodate the human being, you have to be open to what the needs are of the human being are. So you have to open it up. They can't just be the values of this one robber baron on the top, the Carnegies or whatever. You have to make the system inhabitable for the rest of the human beings, the rest of the culture, the rest of the population. And so there was enough people that realized, like, okay, yes, we have to open up this very, very narrow band of values that only serves the elite. And then we have to have this value system apply to normal people, right? And then boom, progressivism came up. It went far, then it went all the way into like prohibition, right? And then they hit prohibition and people were like, okay, stop, pump the brakes. We went too far. Now we have organized crime coming in. Now we have like this whole other layer of, you know what I mean? And so then it kind of evened out. Then we had the same thing in the 60s where you had like the voting rights and, you had this really big conservative moment in American politics after World War II. And you had, people that didn't have the same rights as the powerful. And so there was another moment now. Okay, so now we're in this other area where it's like everybody has so many fucking rights, and so that everything is so open that now we're devolving into chaos, right? So it's like in San Francisco, because we don't have standards to be able to say like this is right, this is wrong. You can't do private things on public property. You can't shoot drugs in wide open and yell at people and have your pants around your ankle and then accost people. And you can't, because the progressives are fundamentally open, they're afraid to say no to anything. And so
Yeah.
that ideology is not sufficient for environmental fitness. It was in the late 1800s. That ideology was perfect for the late 1800s. It was what was necessary for that moment so that we could evolve together as a society. It's the opposite of what it is that we need right now. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
what people want to just say that you have one ideology that fits all environments. And it's like, no, sometimes being conservative is good for the environment and sometimes being progressive is good for the environment. But people get aligned with their tribal allegiances and they're like, no, 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 this is the one truth that fits all circumstances. And I think that's fundamentally what we're dealing with right now, and something that I'm realizing in San Francisco is that, this tribalism is actually, this ideological capture is the issue. It's not that the ideas are bad. They're just bad for right now at this instant. And maybe they become good again in 20 years or something. But anyways, have you thought about that? What's your opinion on that rant?
yeah, well, I think that there's a time for conservatives to lead and there's a time for progressives to lead.
Uh-huh.
And they bounce off each other really well. It's like a dance that they go through, and you see it through political history that there's times when things get too liberal and things get too open. We have to start applying more rules. Then the conservatives apply too many rules and it gets too restrictive, and then we've got to open them up. And I think over the last 20 years, we've just seen extreme shifts from one to the other. Like, I feel like in the Bush administration, we felt that we
Hmm.
went too far towards the conservative end.
Yeah.
With Obama, we probably swung back in the other direction. then with Trump, we just had this anomaly because I
Yeah,
think I think Trump is temperamentally progressive. Like he seems like he's
yeah,
very high in openness. He seems
yeah.
more on the libertarian end of the spectrum, but he ran as a conservative, which I think just confused everyone. So I think that there's like a good.
Well, his narcissism trumps everything. His narcissism is at the top of the value hierarchy. And so whatever serves that narcissism, he can switch. Because if you look at him in the 80s, he was outwardly expressing his views to align with the left, and he was using the DNC to advance his, much like Sam Bankman-Fried used the establishment, the leftist establishment, to further his personal ambitions. Trump was doing the same thing in the 80s. So
Mm,
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. So that's interesting. So you think psychologically his openness aligns better with a progressive framework than a
absolutely.
conservative framework.
He doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a conservative to me. He doesn't act like conservatively, really ever.
Right.
Now
Because
he's
even when
pushing
he's like
conservative values because he knows that those
yeah,
conservative values and running that campaign is going to get him elected. But I think
right.
that him running that confusing campaign has just like psychologically confused everyone. And I think a lot of Trump supporters that did consider themselves liberals that are moving towards conservatism, they're confused by it as well. They're like, well, I guess I'm a conservative now. I kind of agree with what Trump's saying, but I don't think a lot of those people are actually temperamentally conservative. I think they just think that the
Yeah,
left's gone too far, and that's what I think the
right.
big problem is that because progressives have got everything that they wanted over the last
Yeah,
50 years.
exactly. They won.
Like, and
Like
exactly,
they
they
already
won.
get they already won.
Yep, you've got the civil
Yeah.
rights movement,
Yeah.
women's rights movement,
Yeah.
gay rights movement.
Yeah.
You've got enormous freedoms,
Yeah.
and then
But
the
now they're
question is,
like, we
what do
want the
they fight?
children now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
It's so fucked.
yeah, once you get everything
Yeah.
you want, like what do they want after that? And it seems that they want
Right.
power and control.
Right.
They're like, well, we're
Right.
going to
They
control
want
everything.
immortality.
Yeah, and they're doing it through this Marxist ideology that seems like
Yeah.
it's like the liberal ideology, if you want to call it that, taken to its end, where you see
Yeah.
the entire reality as a victim oppressor narrative. And there's victims that are being victimized, and that there's oppressors that are oppressing them. And that's just too simplistic a view, and it's a narrative structure that you can use to demonize anyone.
Yeah.
I just feel like the left's gone way too into that ideological realm. And the right does that as well, but over the last few years, I don't see the right going to that extreme of like Nazism. But the left
Yeah.
just has fully adopted this ideology, and it's just gone too far.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I think what's happening with technological advancement, and we'll have to see how AI plays into this, is the allegiances towards the group in some ways are diminishing, at least when you look at the traditional ones like, patriotism, nationalism, it's there are people that align themselves with that, but more and more people are dissociating themselves with their neighbors and cultures and fellow countrymen.
Yeah.
And the technological advancements are in a lot of ways catering content to us as an individual, not as groups. It's like when you look at your own Instagram feed or the YouTube algorithm that's trained on you, or even your Google News feed that you can select, more articles like this, less articles like this. You're removing it's actually a movement towards individuality. And so then in the political spectrum, you actually do see the rise of the anomaly, like what you were saying. So you saw Trump, that took over the RNC and became the face of the new conservatives. And then now you see what like RFK is doing, and you're like, what the fuck is this? I mean, okay, he's a Democrat, but
Yeah.
is that and is the Kennedys were all Democrats, and but is he a Democrat in the way that the DNC is Democratic?
Well,
It doesn't
I think
seem
he's
like it.
I think he's temperamentally a liberal. Like he seems
Yeah,
that
like a
seems to be
classic
his
liberal.
psychological makeup is a classic
Yeah.
liberal. But that classic liberal mindset doesn't fit in with what the DNC is actually pushing now, because they're pushing for authoritarian control. So
Right.
he's running as a liberal, but he's completely disagreeing with the current Democratic Party.
Yeah. And I mean, I find myself aligning more towards him than even DeSantis or I mean, obviously, like Trump, I'm just like, ugh. And then Biden is like, what the fuck? You know, because Biden is really Harris at this point, right? Because that fucker's gonna die.
Yeah,
And so when you look at who else is out there, I mean, I'm fine. Did you listen to the Rogan interview with RFK
I've
recently?
heard some clips from it, but haven't listened to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, I think he's I think he's the best of the bunch out there at some point. I'm finding myself getting more aligned with him as things go on. But, you
Yeah,
know, it's interesting just to see, you know, in line with what, you know, we talk about, how is the role of technology influencing consciousness? And it does seem to be on a very high level that we're allowed to become more and more individualistic, because we can cater our interests and our actions as we move out into the world more specifically to the uniqueness of our decisions that's mitigated through technological tools. So now we don't have to, you know, consume culture through the church, or we don't have to control, you know, through the lens of like these, you know, big group you know, territories. It's like we can find exactly what it is that we want to find.
yeah,
And so I think that that is going to dislodge people from these giant political parties, especially now that, you know, the corporate media is being dissolved, because people just don't trust, they're starting to realize that, oh, this is propaganda. You know, this is a
yeah.
propaganda that you know is incentivizing people to speak. They're not speaking truly. They're speaking because they want to, you know, enroll people in their program.
Yeah, and historically, that institutional media was the medium for information communication around the world. We got
Yeah.
everything from those institutions, and that helped us as individuals as well, but it became a bit tyrannical. And now with the internet, social media, podcasts, we can we don't have to communicate via those institutional media companies. So that does increase our capacity for individuality to an extent. But also you've got the companies that are running those social media platforms that are censoring people and still being that controlling, censoring authority. I think that's why what's going on at Twitter now is so interesting, because
Yeah.
Elon Musk is really pushing for as much free speech and open debate as possible. I think it's really interesting what he's doing with community notes. Have you seen that on
Yeah.
Twitter? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's where like
Mm-hmm.
a group of people can come in and like do a fact check basically on any piece of content, and it seems to be working better than any institution doing it. And there's companies like the BBC came out with, like, I think it's called BBC Truth. It's their misinformation headquarters, and they're
Oh,
going to
great.
verify what's true and what's not.
Yeah. 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 Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I think we're headed into strange territory with that, especially with deepfakes. So I've been talking to you about this the last week. I've been like
Yeah.
studying what's going on with deepfakes, and
Yeah.
I think that they're going to challenge our whole idea of what truth is, and they're going to cause a ton of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have any authority that can tell us whether a given video is true or not. So you're already seeing it on the
I
political
know.
spectrum. Like there's videos coming out of Vladimir Putin speeches that people are saying are deepfakes. Um, DeSantis released an ad campaign last week that had a deepfake video in it of Trump hugging Fauci, which supposedly never
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
So it's a strange time. Like what's going to happen next year in the run up to the election? In, let's say, in like the few weeks before the election, that these crazy deepfake videos go viral online, and we don't have time to validate whether any of them are true or not. And they're going to be affecting people's decisions. And it's going to make everyone question what truth is and how we actually detect truth, because we've had the ability to manipulate images for a long time, and we've kind of gotten used to that. Like, companies will like airbrush a photo of a model or something, or Photoshop something in. But with video, it's just so much more real, and it just has a different effect on your brain. And now we can deepfake any celebrity, any politician onto a video and get them to say anything we want and in their own voice, or at least sounding like their own voice. And we can do it, anyone can do it for next to nothing. Like, the tools are just free and available online. And like a couple of years ago, like I was showing like Elena and some of my friends deepfake videos, and they're like, "Yeah, but you can still tell that it's not real."
Yeah, that's all going to
Uh,
change.
that's totally changed just in the last 6 months.
So
Like
what?
look
So
at Midjourney over the last
yeah,
6 months. Midjourney
yeah,
version 1 and 2, they were creating some cool images, but Midjourney today is creating hyper realistic images that you can't tell from reality. And
yeah. That
deepfakes,
Unreal Engine 5 too. When you're talking about it, like environments.
yep,
So okay, so let's play this out. Okay, so let's say so we already don't know what's going on in like the war in Ukraine and Russia, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so we don't even have like deep fakes are playing a minimal role in what's actually happening in that part of the world, and we still don't know what's going on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
how it going forward like 10 or 20 years when we're just talking about an evaluation of what's happening in a geographic region in the world, how do we even how do we even understand what's happening in Ukraine at all? Like at
yeah.
all.
Well, I
And
think
then
you need to give the Ukrainian people access to the same free speech platform that allows them to post the truth and get involved in the community notes. I
oh,
think
okay,
like
yeah.
because we can't rely on a centralized authority for like determining the truth of media information anymore. We can't.
Hmm.
We know that those institutions are corrupt. They've lied to us so many times, but it seems like the vision for Twitter is to that a better alternative is to have a decentralized set of citizen journalists, and where people can kind of debunk each other's posts if they don't think that they're true.
All
Maybe
right. So then
that's the most scalable way of solving the
all
problem, but
right.
it's not
Okay,
perfect.
so here's what happens, dude. So then everybody it's like a democratic system, right? Where everybody has one vote, right? You say, this is what happened in my neighborhood, or
Yeah.
this is what happened in San Francisco. Here's the video of it. It's corroborated with this. You post it on X, Twitter or whatever. That gets verified by other people in the community that can either say yes or no, this happened. Okay.
Yes.
When it's yes, your profile that's linked to your authenticity, your realness, gets voted up, as this is a reliable source of information, or it gets voted down and this is like a not reliable person. Okay. So then that's going to go into a database, and then we're going to have this dystopian nightmare which we just avoided a couple of years ago with people, where you're going to have a Yelp rating system for people,
Mm.
and this is going to be a ground up way of having a social credit score that's not controlled by an entity like the CCP, but it is controlled by the hive mind,
Mm.
which is going to be like Reddit, right? So Reddit has a reputational score where you have
Mm.
karma, right? So that's basically a social credit score. And so then other companies, whether it's like MasterCard or the Toyota dealership or whatever it is, are going to be able to see, you as a person, your karma in Reddit terms or social credit score in CCP, and they're going to be able to make a decision based on that, whether or not they want to collaborate with you, which means, allowing you basic societal tools to be able to function. And so we're going to self put ourselves into this social credit score just by the, advancement of deep fakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
because we're not going to have any other way to know what fucking reality is. And so in our evaluation of what is reality, we're also going to have to evaluate, who are you?
Yeah.
Like,
Because
who are you? Who am I? And so this previous nightmare of social credit score could actually become an essential component of the structure of society.
yeah, and I never really thought about that. That there could be like a
Yeah, I never thought about it
bottom
before
up
5 minutes
need
ago.
for that social credit score. So you're saying that if we do have a if we're determining the truth of a piece of content by a
Yeah,
decentralized set of people going in and
yeah,
saying whether it's true or not, then we
yeah.
need to give each individual a trust score, essentially. So we know how to
Or an AI a trust score, or whatever the entity is that's expressing, that's typing, that's putting out code into the universe.
yeah.
Because AI is going to be on there too. You're going to have, okay, and then also with the individual, you're also going to have your personal AI that runs on your fucking iPhone 18 or whatever. Like, they're already training small scale large language models on M2 chips,
Yeah.
right? So you're going to have a personal assistant that's going to be basically your intern, that's going to be producing 70% of the language that you put out into the world, that you're going to be curating. And so then there's some people that are going to be way more lazy than that, and they're going to have 100% of stuff, or they're going to, and then you're going to have different products that are going to want to align with you if you have celebrity, right? So if you have some sort of clout, now you're going to be shilling for fucking Ridge wallets or Casper mattresses or whatever the fuck it is. Right. So now you're going to be incentivized to be able to put out more and more content. You're going to have less incentive to be able to make sure that it's true, unless you have this uh, karmic score that's hovering over your head like a halo, that you're going to be able to see, like a Black Mirror episode, when you're wearing your Apple Vision Pros
Yeah.
walking through the world. This is all fucking happening, and it's happening because we don't know what fucking reality is. We don't know.
Yeah. Have
We don't
you
know.
have you watched the new season of Black Mirror yet?
I saw the one with the Miley Cyrus one, and with the little doll,
No, I think
and
that was last season.
I was like, God damn it, that sucks.
I think that was last
With,
season though. There's a
oh,
new
really? Okay, so there's a new one out now. Is it
yeah,
good?
and it's pretty good. I think it's dropped off a lot since the first couple of
Yeah.
seasons, but the
Well, the
first
first
episode,
episode of the first season of Black Mirror was one of the most mind blowing
yeah,
pieces of television ever put out, with the pig and the
absolutely.
prime minister. I mean, you're just like, what the fuck? It
Yeah,
was
that episode and the
crazy.
one where they could go back. They had a chip where they could go back and rewatch their memories, and it
Yeah,
was a couple. That was fantastic.
yeah, that one was fantastic too. Yeah, okay, so the new one, is there one episode in there that I should watch?
Yeah, the first episode is about deepfakes. And
Okay,
it's
okay.
a bit extreme and dramatic, but it
Yeah.
plays with some interesting ideas. So this woman has a really bad day. She comes home and turns on her Netflix, and there's a TV
Uh-huh.
show about her and about that day that just happened.
Already.
Yeah, so
So it's
it's
kind of like what we're doing right now.
yeah, so it's basically
We can watch later tonight.
so basically
Yeah.
her phone is listening to her and watching her and seeing everything that's happening in her day. And then a quantum computer AI that the film studio owns will just instantly generate an episode of her life, but make it more dramatic and kind of and the TV episode showed more of the subtext of what was actually happening in her day, which was interesting. And it had deep fake characters they had
Wow.
so Selma Hayek played the
Wow.
played her in the TV show, and then
Wow.
she tries to sue the studio. The studio says no, you signed away the
Yeah,
rights
well,
to the
don't spoil
image.
it too much for me.
And she
But
said, yeah, and tries to sue Selma Hayek, and they said that's actually not Selma Hayek in it. It's just a deep fake of her.
right.
So even the actors are deep fakes in the future.
Right. So it's an IP issue of yourself, of your realness. And then it again gets into the question of, like, well, where is the soul? Like, what is the thing that needs to be protected? And so now we need to define what the soul is versus what the image of the soul is, which is actually, part of the issue of, like, what Jung says about God. He says, you can never know God, but you can know the image of God.
Yeah,
Right. And so it's like, we have to ask ourselves, like, can I ever know myself, or do I only understand the image of myself? Because whatever it is, whatever the threshold of knowledge is, it still goes on before,
yeah,
deeper than that. you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. So where I just find myself thinking like, I did 2 years of wilderness survival classes, when I was like 21 after I had my big spiritual experience. And like
Mm.
when I was living in a VW bus, and I was convinced that the world was going to end there because I had a personal apocalyptic moment, right?
Mm.
And I was like, I just like walked out of my life. I sold everything, got into a VW bus, and was like, I have overwhelming fear along every dimension of reality, and I have to overcome this fear, or I'm never going to be free. And so I chased that all the way back until I got to like, oh, I can't even depend on society because what if I'm in the streets? Then I'm going to be afraid of being on the streets. So let me go live in the streets, right?
Mm.
And so then I, went through all that, and then I was like, well, what about food? And I was like, okay, well, I got to go find out how to get food. So, and then I did that, and I'm like, well, then how do I sleep outside? And then I had to go figure out like shelter building and fire by friction and all that. So I reduced it. I reduced my entire life all the way down to fire, water, shelter, food, right? And
Yeah.
so then I like started over from zero. And now when I look at reality being upended to such a degree that you don't even know what you're looking at when you leave the house, potentially in a few years, if you're wearing augmented reality glasses that become so real where you're like
Yeah.
pushing against the wall, and you're like, is that a wall or is that just the image of a wall? So where does it end? It ends in having your own ranch or something somewhere up in the hills, somewhere where you're like, okay, the cow's definitely real.
Yeah.
The rutabaga is definitely real. I am definitely warm or cold. My girlfriend or my wife is here or not. My kids are here or not. And with technology moving in, such a degree that you can basically take care of all of your survival level skills, I believe that this movement towards anonymity and personal sovereignty, which is what we're seeing, as we discussed earlier in the conversation, where we're kind of dislodging us, like, removing ourselves from these like ideological tribalism because we're realizing like, oh, this investment of energy is no longer reliable to be able to, uh, allow me to be prosperous in my life. So what do? I have to take on the responsibilities on myself and secure my own area where I know for sure what's reliable and what's not reliable, and I can at least provide for myself in this area. And it's so again, it just goes back for me. It's like I find my mind going like, I gotta walk out of my life again. I gotta create this sovereign territory of this
Yeah.
area that I can have control over. And I'm like, oh, that's what America is. Like that's what this whole country was built on, is people thinking that same way. And so
Yeah.
we're uniquely set up to deal with this reality better than like basically any other society on earth, other than like maybe Australia or Canada or, like so again, it's like these conservative values seem to be becoming more and more relevant and vital for how people are going to actually survive reality moving forward when so many things are called
Yeah.
into question. And it's like, oh, that's all in play right now. Like that's all the laws on the book, the Constitution, the founding of the country, and all of that was specifically set up for us to have sovereignty. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what the deep fakes and this whole like AI revolution and technological advancement, that's what we're going to retreat into, because this openness is going to become the enemy. Like becoming too open, you're like, okay, there's too many things, too many things, too many things. Like, what can I rely on? Okay, I can rely on myself, what I can see, what I can touch, what's in my environment. And, then you start going like, is that food going to come tomorrow? Is the water going to come tomorrow? Is the like what's so anyways, like, that's kind of like as all this deep fake pressure happens, that's where I'm watching my mind go more and more is like like how do I secure my reality in a place that's not dependent on like the city and San Francisco and all of that? It's how what
Yeah.
do you what's your read on that take?
Yeah, I think that more people are going to do what you did with your wilderness survival class
Yeah.
because as the idea of truth gets questioned fundamentally in the digital realm, we're going to go back
Yeah.
to nature in some way. And I think we're going to go back to old religions as well.
Yeah, I think so
That
too.
like I was watching a video about Carl Jung yesterday and
Uh-huh.
he man, he was off the grid. He had no running water. He got all his water from a well.
Yeah.
He had no electricity. He chopped his own wood. Like he
Yeah,
lived
he had that
a
stone
pretty
house
full
by the
life.
lake in
Yeah,
Switzerland, right? What was that called? Something with a B?
Bollingen.
Bollingen. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the way for him to ground his psychic reality was just keeping things extremely simple and keeping them
Hmm.
grounded in nature and his relationship with nature. But in a modern context, that's very hard because you said like the ultimate kind of goal would be to have your own ranch, to have your own
Yeah.
sovereign
Well,
block of nature.
stability.
But not
Yeah.
everyone can do that. Like most people are going to
I
be
think
stuck.
everybody can do that. I
Hmm.
mean, the possibility is there. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like you've heard this, you fly over America and you look down, and 99.99999% of the time, there's nothing down there.
true. Yep.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, it is possible. Like, it's not, we're at the point now where it's like we understand how nature works. We understand how the weather works. We understand how disease works. Like, these things that have been formidable in the past are just not formidable anymore because we have so much knowledge. And, like what we were talking about on our last podcast is, the reason why we are who it is that we are is because we've adapted to an environment, right? That's why we have the values that we have. That's why we have the fears. That's why we have the aspirations. It's why because we've, all throughout the, millions of years of our human evolution, we've had to adapt to an environment that can kill us. That's no longer the case. Like we adapt to the tools that we have to, and now the environment is like pretty much non-threatening, really, and so now you could potentially go like, how big fucking Texas is, you know, you could now potentially go to, I mean, Texas is a little brutal. It's kind of like the outback, in the sense that,
Yep.
middle of Texas is rough, but
Yep.
you could potentially go out there and build a homestead, build some land and be able to live out there. Now, you have issues with community and, isolation that are going to add another kind of pressure, on you and your family. But at the same time, people are hopping off the face of the earth and they're going to be living in spaceships and on the moon and on Mars. And, when we see people living in that kind of environment, you're going to look at the entirety of the earth and be like, "Look, dude, if people can fucking live in orbit, I can live in the middle of Texas, no problem." And
Yeah.
so the technology that's going to be evolving on, in through space technologies is going to allow people to be able to live here. And then even with population collapse that's happening, even in the city and the places that have the densest amount of population, they're going to be thinning out. And so it's this ability to be able to have space and sovereignty is going to become more and more important and vibrant in
Yeah.
human evolution moving forward. And you're going to have fucking wacky people. I mean, like Unabomber level, fucking like deep in the backwoods of Alaska. It's like sort of like when people aren't able to really connect and all, like everything that you see going on right now, I mean, we're going to become mutants, man.
Yeah.
I mean, and then people are going to become like cybernetic weird beings. They're going to have robots as farmhands working on their ranches. You're going
Yeah.
to, it's going to be the fucking wackiest shit
People flying
ever.
around on jetpacks in virtual
Yeah.
reality. It's gonna be
Yeah.
wild, man. And I
Yeah.
feel like we have to go through that and adapt, because
Yeah.
one view based on what you said is like, no, I've got to get a ranch, my own sovereign piece of land, and go
Yeah.
back to nature. But the other view is like, no, we've got to become cyborgs and figure out how to do that. And I think we're going to do both. And I think
We're
people are
going
going
to
to
do both. Yeah.
swing back and forth from both of those realms. And I think the trick is to try and find a balance between them. Like I've got to spend less time using technology. Like I'm thinking about like 1 day a week, I just don't access the internet. I don't go on YouTube,
Yeah.
don't look up Twitter because if you're in it all the time, it starts to psychologically affect you, and that's when you don't know
Hmm.
what's real or not. Like if you're seeing deep fakes and big arguments online about what's fake, what's not, all the political ideas that are being pushed to
Oh
us
my
online
God.
now, like it's pretty toxic. But I find myself
Yeah.
addicted to it as well. Like I can't help but go on the
I'm
Twitter
definitely
feed,
addicted to
see
it.
what's going
I'm
on.
I'm super super addicted to it. It's really disheartening. I just realized like it's even gotten to the point now where it's like it's getting even hard for me to read as much. You know, it's
Yeah,
like I have to train myself to read
you
again.
mean like
And
read a
I'm
book?
like, what the fuck? Yeah, yeah. I mean, like certain books, some books that don't just like fiction I can read. If it's a story that grabs me, no problem. But I mean, if it's like reference books or philosophy books or like books that I'm having to like, furrow my brows to be like, okay, what's being said? Like to really dig into it. Like it never used to be that way. It used to be like I would just be fascinated, like you, like reading like really complicated, hard shit, like not like maps of meaning level,
Yeah,
but like Carl Jung, like I could read that stuff, and then now I just find myself like wandering. Just watch my brain like checking out, and I'm like, what the fuck, And I
yeah,
know it's just because I'm training myself for short bursts of attention.
yeah.
Um,
And there's not as much novelty when you're reading a book, but when you're swiping on videos on Twitter, there's new visual novelty every 5, 10 seconds. So your
yeah,
brain's just getting a dopamine hit constantly. And then you start reading a book, especially like a slow, technical nonfiction book, and you get
yeah,
like 3 pages in, and your brain's just like, where's the novelty? Like, I need something new, and you end up putting it away. And I think I've been pretty
yeah,
good at that. Like, I still read a lot. I still
yeah.
read a
You do
couple of
read a
books a
lot.
week.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
You read a shitload.
but I read aloud as well. And I don't know why,
Yeah,
but that helps because I feel like if I just read a book silently, I can get zoned out. But if I'm reading it aloud, it's
yeah.
slower and harder to do, but I'm more focused on what I'm reading.
Yeah, but you're engaging more neurons. You're engaging the neurons in your body, because if you're reading aloud, it's like you're probably walking around, you have neurons that are all up and down your body, and you're acting out the
Mm.
words, like even just vocalizing it, you're having to engage your body in a way that, just existing in the mind isn't
Yeah, and you
doing it.
can't just skim over a section like you do when you're reading. Like sometimes you'll like read through a
Yeah,
paragraph really fast and you'll think to yourself, I didn't really read that. Like, but you just keep
yeah,
going. But when you're reading aloud, you can't help but stay with it. And I've also
yeah.
been combining reading a digital book and listening to the audio book at the same time. So there's a really interesting feature in on the Kindle app that if you
Okay.
buy an audiobook from Amazon and they also have the Kindle book, then you can sync them up. So while you're reading it, it actually highlights the sentence that you're reading. And it's fantastic. Like
Hmm.
having the visuals of the words and listening to especially the author read it at the same time. It's fantastic. I'm doing that a lot more.
Well, it seems like that's going to be maybe one of the default modes in like that Apple Vision Pro,
Mm,
because you're going to be able to, like, you could, like, as you're looking through even like blog posts or whatever, you're going to have an AI that can help like read through it with you, and
yep.
you're going to be watching you're going to hear it and you're going to watch the letters and words get highlighted as you move through. That might be a real advancement in learning, actually.
Yeah, I can't wait to try that. The eye tracking. Because we're so used to like
Yeah.
using our finger or using a mouse to point to something within a computer. Now we just have to look at it and tap our fingers and it's going to open it up. I can't wait to try that out.
Yeah. Irina knows somebody, most of her friends, people, her associates and people that she worked with are from the former Soviet Union.
Hmm.
And they are not aspirational people, like they are very pessimistic, very like, have an extreme negative bias, like they hedge their decisions towards this shit's not going to work out. You
Fair
know what
enough.
I mean?
If you look at
Because
history, Like,
Yeah,
fair
yeah,
enough.
exactly. And she knows somebody who worked on the Apple Vision Pro,
Hmm.
and this person, they couldn't talk a lot about it, but they were like, this shit's it's like truly next level. And like it seems like even from the reviews of people that are on YouTube, they say this it could go, because it truly is, there is something there that's never been, like, the tech's far enough along that your body is starting to accept it. It's almost like, like a
Yeah,
prosthetic. Like there was a long time with prosthetics um that connection between, like, having, moving a hand and you know like the body would reject it, or it just wouldn't accept it. Like there had to be like a certain level of um like technological resolution for the
yeah,
body to accept it,
yeah,
that it's just a threshold. Because I think everybody knows that headset type device, whatever, the VR headset, AR headset, whatever it is, like, it's coming for sure. Like
yeah.
there's
Like
no way, like.
yeah, I used the
And so
Oculus Rift when it came out, and I
yeah,
was shocked at when you put it on at how much your brain just thinks that that's reality.
yeah,
But when I used it for a little bit, it didn't have that level of resolution for it to just be like an extra appendage on me. Like I
yeah.
found myself getting sick, getting headaches, getting a little dizzy, or sometimes you look at something, it's just not quite clear. So maybe Apple's got to that point now where it just feels like a complete natural extension of yourself. So
And then
I felt like,
imagine, like, say if you did have like this ranch somewhere out there, right? And you didn't know anything about anything, right? You just get this like house that's out on like 5 acres of land, and you go out there and you have your AI assistant, your chat GPT thing, whatever, and you run into, and you're like, okay, well, what are the building codes here? What is the proper way of constructing, plumbing, or, this machine? Like maybe you get like a Tesla power wall, and you just engage with your AI assistant to be able to say, hey, let's troubleshoot this. This is what's going on. And then you can, so the thing that I think is the most scary about people, other than being, maybe isolated from other people and a community, is like most people just don't have enough knowledge to be able to run a ranch. In the same way that people don't want to go out, everybody wants to go out and like have like a sailboat or something, but you go out sailing one time and you're like, oh, this is crazy. Like, so, like,
yeah,
if you don't properly handle this boat, you're going to die. And the same thing is like, it takes a almost like a maniac to be able to go up to Alaska and start like homesteading up there, because you're like, oh, the consequences are real. Like you could die, and it's really complicated. But
yeah,
if you have all this tech that can just help you be like, how do I set up solar panels? How do I grow a garden? Like, how do I, what's the weather going to be? What's the history of the weather in this, and all this stuff. And then you can just have somebody just, or something, walk you through the steps of buy a hammer, get this type of screw, nail or whatever, and then like construct something. Like people are going to be able to construct their own reality in ways that previous generations have never even thought to think about,
exactly, yeah.
you
Because
know?
most of human history, we've been in a world of knowledge scarcity. Like
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
you didn't have much knowledge on you. You didn't have access to much knowledge. You had to go through institutions to get that knowledge, and it took a lot of time. But now we're hitting this world of knowledge abundance, where there's like just too much knowledge, and it's at our
mm-hmm,
fingertips within seconds. And
mm-hmm,
we've seen that with the internet, just with YouTube. Like if you want to like learn how to build a doghouse, there's 100
mm-hmm.
videos of it on YouTube that will tell you, yeah,
Yeah,
buy this hammer, buy these pieces of wood, and do this.
yeah,
And with social media, that knowledge has moved around a lot faster. But with AI, it's just giving us an extra level of that knowledge abundance where we can just ask it a question. It has this huge array of knowledge across many domains, and it's able to just quickly pull together answers for us. Like
yeah. And there's Yeah, and you're gonna have robots that, like you look at, like, you've probably seen the
Yeah.
new Boston Dynamic robots that can climb the scaffolding and do backflips and like hoist up
Yep.
planks of wood to people. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like it reminds me of, like, I remember my grandma, great grandma, she died at 94 or 96 or something like that, and she was born in Boston, like during a time when they still lit the streets with oil lamps, right? So somebody would go through the streets. This is my great grandma,
Hmm.
and they used to go through the streets with a flame and like light the lamps every night, right? And she was born before the Wright brothers, right? So
Hmm.
before flight. And she told me at one point, she said that when human beings landed on the moon, she realized that people um, in her generation, when she was young, when she was a child, it wasn't even a thought. Like, people didn't even have the thought of like
Yeah.
looking at the moon and feel like somebody could step on that.
Yeah.
Like, that's how far that, and that happened in one generation. She in one lifetime. She went from watching human beings take flight for the first time to stepping on the moon in '69.
Yeah.
And so now, and again, it's like it wasn't even an idea when she was young. And so now we're in a very similar situation where it's like there's going to be realities that are going to come online by the time that we die that weren't even ideas
Yeah.
now,
I think we're
you
seeing it with
know?
AI, like
Yeah.
ChatGPT, like Mid Journey, like those have
Well, even
barely been
like,
ideas for most people.
yeah. And I mean, even the internet, right? Like, when you look at all
Yeah.
the legendary sci-fi from, Asimov to Bradbury to, Heinlein, like nobody saw the internet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nobody wrote about the internet. They were all writing about flying cars because you're like, okay, that's
Yeah.
obvious, but
And
nobody wrote about the internet. And,
yeah.
so, and I would say that probably, when people 1,000 years from now look back on human evolution, they would say that it's probably most likely that human beings evolved into the new species when the internet came online. Because as soon
Yeah.
as the internet came online, now biological evolution is forever married to technological advancement, and there's no divorcing the two. And so, whatever it was, there's like human being classic, which was, probably before email, really. So, probably before like 94, 96.
Yeah.
Like, everything before then was original human, and then post 96 ish on 90s 2000, I guess we could say,
Yep.
is now whatever it is that we're going to call humans, which
Yeah.
is
And there's
now
little
fucking
increments within
just
there.
different.
Like we had mobile
Yeah.
phones, smartphones
Yeah.
made a huge difference. Social media made a huge difference. Now
Hmm.
AI is making a huge difference. Now VR is making a huge difference. And like you said, like we often get this technology wrong, or we don't even come up with
Hmm.
the ideas of what it could be like. Like I'm
Hmm.
watching the Star Wars prequel trilogies right now. I don't know why, but yesterday I just felt like starting them up.
Which ones are those? Is
It's
that
like
the
a
New Hope and
no,
or
not the. It's like the Phantom Menace, the ones in the
oh, yeah,
'90s.
yeah, with the pod racing?
Yeah, and it's
That's the
pretty good.
first one.
Like I'm
Yeah.
not a huge Star Wars fan, but I'm enjoying
Yeah.
it. But one thing I feel like they got hugely wrong is the droids and the drones that are
Mm.
like AI powered robots because they're kind of retarded. Like
Yeah.
they're very
Yeah,
easy
they
to
are.
kill.
Yeah.
They never hit anyone when they're shooting.
Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
I think you totally got wrong at what AI is going to have the ability to do. Like they're
Yeah.
talking about AI robots now, they'll come in swarms in a battle and
Yeah.
they'll be able to detect where you're standing right now
Yeah.
and they'll be able to
Where you
predict the
Yeah.
all of the possible variations about where you could move in the next second. And they're going to shoot at
Yeah.
all of those spots simultaneously, so there's no way they can miss. So
Yeah,
it
but
was
they're not going to
interesting.
be fighting humans. They're going to be fighting other robots. So,
Well, they
like,
could
when
easily fight humans. It depends on how
I
you
know, but
program them.
that's a further level of, okay, so when you're in think about a castle, right? Like a classic castle. So you have the king and the queen in the castle, right? Well, the king and the they're like the nucleus of the cell, right? Like, they're in the holy of holies. and all around them are, you know, the they have their army, their soldier, then they have the walls of the castle, then they have the moat, then they have the village, then they have the county, the country, the da, da, da. So so if we're going to be invaded by, like, say, some force, like, say, some antagonistic country or something, and they send over their drones and robots or whatever, they're going to be fighting American drones and robots,
First,
right?
as the first
First,
layer of defense.
first, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's going to be, so you have, I think you have to think about it in terms of like lines of defenses
Yeah.
that go out, right? And yes, like if you get some sort of like, Decepticon in there, that can actually like take battle versus flesh, yeah, you're fucked, right?
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
flesh is going to be, maybe the flesh is going to be in a mech or something, or in some sort of like tank, or in some sort of like personal defense device, because all this is going to evolve simultaneously in the same way that when people have these fears about AGI coming online, and then all of a sudden you have like, what is the Terminator one? Skynet.
Skynet.
Skynet coming on, or the Matrix coming on, and then just like darkening the skies and wiping out. No, 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 no. They're going to be battling. You're going to have, it's more going to be like the Decepticons and Opticons.
I
What's
don't
the
know.
good guys in the Transformers?
I don't even know.
Autocon? Anyways, I used to play with them when I was a kid, but I forget. But you're going to have these forces where everybody's just going, it's all going to come up at the same time. You're not just going to have this force, this offense. You're also going to have a defense, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's going to battle itself out. There's going to be a stalemate. It's like in the same way that people are like, oh my God, like we're never going to have you know, like AI is, beat the best chess player in the world. And now AI has proven its, superiority. It's like, no, humans on one side are going to develop their AI, and then you're going to have like AI versus AI playing chess, and you're going to see who the engineers are on what side that can come up with the best learning model or neural network to be able to defeat the other side. It's just,
Yeah.
that's what being cybernetic is. That's what being a cybernetic human being is
Yeah.
you're just developing new tools. The tools themselves, because they aren't conscious and they don't have a desire structure unless they're programmed to have a desire structure, which is very, very limited, because that's the problem with being a finite entity in an infinite universe, is you will very quickly stop being able to navigate the terrain that's in front of you, because you're not programmed to do it. In the same way that, these self-driving cars, well, you know what? Like they're only going to be able to go on the roads. I'd be very curious to see, like, maybe they will be able to. Now I'm thinking maybe I'm wrong, but because now I'm thinking like with Unreal Engine 5 and all of this stuff, you can program you've seen that video of that Rivian truck that goes through the forest on
Yeah.
Unreal Engine 5. So
Yeah.
if you can model, and all that modeling that's done in Unreal Engine 5 is just mapping on real territory in the earth. Like that's where they get their models from. They go out and they scan environments, and then they upload them, digitize them, and then they're used as assets, landscape assets, to build these video game worlds off of. So yeah, maybe, yeah, that's the other thing. It's like maybe because the entire Earth will be modeled. They're already doing it with Google
Yeah.
Earth. So then you run an AI on the model, so then AI can go anywhere.
Yeah. It will be able to go anywhere
Fuck.
easily.
God damn it.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, it's going to get wild. I mean, there's just these ideas that are going to come online that, again, like to what you were saying, it's like we're going to be existing in a world that we don't even have ideas for yet,
Yeah.
let alone realities.
Even, like Tesla's released their full self-driving. They've really amped that up over the last year. So there's fully self-driving cars in Austin now, in San
Oh,
Francisco.
they're all over. So first of all, Irina has a Tesla and does full self-driving, no
Yeah.
problem.
And
Has
what do you think of
summons.
it?
It works.
Yeah.
It doesn't not work. It works. So we went to this. I'd have to tell you about this. We went to this like Tantra workshop last night at this fucking hippie commune place in San Francisco with these fucking total fraudsters that were basically doing this. It was wild. It was so stupid. I mean, it was fun to be able to go and check it out. It was just not my jam. But anyways, we were coming back and we were getting into the car, which was parked in Lower Haight. And while we were putting away our stuff in, the car, the Tesla, um, there was four driverless cruise taxis that drove by. Four.
Mm.
In the time that it took for us to get in the car.
Mm.
I mean, they are all over. I got stuck behind one the other day. So I was going downtown.
How does it
What?
feel when you see a car go by
Oh,
you
dude,
without a driver?
I was furious, and then I'm like, "Fuck! I can't even be mad. I can't even honk
Yeah,
because
it's
there's nothing in there that's gonna, Because what happened was, so I was crossing Market, and it was in this construction zone, and there was two lanes, and I was following this cruise, and we're in this like kind of like highly improbable, like non-standard sort of way, and I'm like, let's see how this fucker negotiates this. And it hit this area, and then all of a sudden it decided it wanted to get into the left lane in this like kind of wonky area. And because it was so anomalous, it just stopped. And it had its blinker on, and I was right behind it. And because traffic was way backed up for like blocks, and I was right behind it, it couldn't get over to the left, and everybody was going behind it, and then everybody behind me was going left, going right. So I was trapped. There was just
yeah.
no way I could get going. Like I couldn't move, and I was like, first of all, and then I just had to be a dick and just pull out because there's just no way I just had to merge in there like once traffic slowed a little bit. And then I was thinking about this cruise car, and I'm like, these fuckers still might be there today,
Yeah.
and then what if you're in a taxi, right? And you're like, the other thing is that these cruise cars, like, they have no urgency or whatever. Like, they're just going to stay in this holding power pattern for, 15 minutes, an hour, a day, a week, like whatever. Like, it doesn't care. 24 hours a day. It's just running a program. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be good. Cause I think that, once you have less variability in traffic in San Francisco,
Yeah.
it's going to make traffic a lot easier. And then it's going to be able to get people out of their cars a lot more because I think the price for, ride sharing is going to go way down because labor is going to go down. You're able to use these cars 24 hours a day. The overhead is going to be minimized because you're just basically having just the nature of it being a robot, and you don't have to provide workers' compensation. You don't have to, all this other, overhead that goes into running this service is going to be greatly reduced. And so I think at the end of the day, it's like once they get it figured out, it's amazing that it works this well right now.
Yeah.
And you hear all these horror stories like what I went through. There's like SFS and these local blogs and stuff. You know how they're all anti-technology, like anti-Musk, they're progressives, but they hate actual progress. They just want like progress, which is just to be stuck in some ideological fucking whirlpool. But so they hate this stuff because they think it's anti-human, even though it's like super pro-human. So I think like once it gets going, it's going to be really, really good. And but it was really strange. And honestly, like I can tell you, I'll walk out this apartment, be walking down the street, and the odds of me seeing a driverless car right now is like very, very, very high. I mean, you must have the same thing in Austin, don't you?
Yeah, I've seen them around. They
Yeah.
just started it here. It's funny that it's like
I signed up
it changes the
to use
nature
it.
of road rage. Like, who do you
Yeah.
rage
Right. And then you feel like an idiot.
at?
And then you realize like how badly you want to feel the rage because you think that you don't want to.
Yeah.
You think you're like, and every time you experience your own road rage, you're like, God, I'm a piece of shit. Like, why I can't keep it together like this? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
unevolved cretin am I that I don't have control of my own emotions like this? And then you notice a situation like I got into, and you want to get mad, and then I noticed like I was kind of bummed that I couldn't get mad. It was so
Yeah.
weird. It was
Yeah.
so strange. And to think like that kind of like psychological development is going to be happening along, so many different lines as technology becomes more prevalent, in our daily lives.
Yep.
Like when you're answering an email, you're like, am I talking to Bobby or am I talking to his AI assistant?
Yeah. Yep.
It's I think at the end of the day, it's going to be good, but I think you got to stay in front of it. And I would be
I think it's a
interested.
lot more productive too. Like
Yeah.
if I've got a fully self-driving car to get me from A to B, I don't have to be there driving. And maybe I won't have road rage because I'm like, whatever, I'm sitting in the back seat watching a movie or working on an
Well,
email or something.
and the other thing that I'm thinking about, it's like there's this, when you go east on 80 and you hit Sacramento, like as you're going up to Tahoe, there's this little community up there called Grass Valley that a bunch of artists have got to. It's
Yeah.
like it's right when it starts going from chaparral to like kind of alpine environment, and it's amazing. It's like my favorite kind of ecological environment to be in. Environmental ecological. Anyways, but it's like 2.5 hours away on a good day, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, well, this is kind of unreasonable to negotiate from San Francisco. It's like 5 hours, here and back. However, say you have like a van that just drives itself and I'm in the back, and rather than me being at my shop doing work, I'm in the van doing work. So now all of a sudden the nature of this commute is totally different,
Yeah.
and it makes it more reasonable to be like, I want to be up there, you know,
Yeah.
and because I'm able to use that time, I'm not, so it's just things are like really changing a lot, and I'd be curious. I, I think both of us are probably leaning more towards this idea of at some point, you expressed interest in at least getting a house with a yard and stuff. Like, what if you expanded that idea out to getting like a ranch or some land?
Yeah. Yep. I think
And
that'd
then
be
it's like,
ideal, especially if I can quickly travel to places. If we get Elon Musk's underground tunnels, very fast, full self-driving cars. If we have
but then it
internet
makes,
everywhere, like we've got Starlink now, so I can be out in the middle of nowhere in some
right.
ranch and still have high-speed internet.
But then it makes it more reasonable to be back in California, but 3 hours away from the Bay Area.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
know what I mean? And I mean the taxes and all of that is a little bit brutal, but that could be interesting. I don't know. Like we should definitely keep talking about this, and it would be cool if we could get some sort of community together, where we could, you know, do art and be creative and be able to support. Because the other thing is like when you have a community, you can kind of share utilities. You can share water, internet, power. It's like if you can kind of get, it's hard to do if you're one person, but if you can get
Yeah.
like 10 people in an area, it's a lot more stable and fun and interesting. And I think that this type of idea that I'm talking about is going to become more and more available for people that are thinking like this in the future. But I don't even think people are thinking like this right now. But
I think a minority of people are. Like I see like
yeah.
Tim Pool, he's done that. Like he lives in
Oh,
New
really?
Hampshire, like he's pretty much off the grid, self-sustaining. He's got a small community around him where they help each other. So there's people thinking about it and doing it, but it's going to take a huge mental shift for most people.
I mean, I'm already there, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to just like have my shop in San Francisco
Austin.
and like, yeah, it's just the flight out there is brutal. It's a different animal when it's like a 6 hour flight
Yeah. Yeah.
than being like 3 hours in a car where you're just working on your laptop. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. But I miss you, man, and I wish the distance wasn't quite so long. But I don't know. Are you still toying around with the idea of LA?
Still, definitely, yeah,
Really?
yeah. Like I don't want to move to LA. I don't want to
Yeah,
move
who
back to
would?
California. I really think California is a failed state. But
But
right
it's
now,
changing though,
all
man. Like,
the whole movie industry is there, so it's still
I
an
gotta,
option for me. But I'm trying to stay in Texas and get into the film
yeah,
industry, but that's hard.
I know. Texas is actually more and more appealing to me too. But I have to tell you, man, it really is changing around here. Like, people are fucking fed up. Like,
Yeah,
it's finally gotten to the place now where it seems like this like far left progressive ideology, because it was so luxurious to have, because it felt like it was kind of inconsequential, it was more just like a kind of a conversational talking point, that you
yeah,
would discuss with people while you're like out to drinks or having dinner or whatever. And now when you're looking at like, oh, the city's literally crumbling, people are talking about it being in a doom loop, like things
yeah.
really are falling apart now. And anybody that you talk to is like, I don't know what to do, but this is not working. And people are not calling themselves progressives in San Francisco anymore. Like
Interesting.
people are fine. So I think, it takes a long time for, different political options to become available. And the last people to make any changes are going to be the people that are still holding office. But the general people in San Francisco, you should maybe reach out to like Tim and Charlie and see what,
Yeah,
I would be curious. I haven't talked to them in a while, but I'd be curious to know what they're thinking at this point. But
yeah,
it is shifting. It is shifting. So I don't know, maybe in 5 or 10 years. I mean, the thing about, the Bay Area is like, nobody saw AI coming, and now people are talking about that might be one of the things that revitalizes the city is because you do have a bunch of startups. People are realizing that remote work isn't really working, especially for innovation. That you
yeah.
really do need people chatting together and being in the same room, and you know that perhaps the all this like vacant office space might be inhabited by these new AI startups. They're talking about it's like a perhaps like $1 trillion. I mean, who knows? But I mean, like there's a lot of money that's being invested in AI startups,
But
and
I
it's
wonder,
all
I
in
wonder
San Francisco.
how many AI startups have just started in Austin. Like the Austin population is growing 10% year on year,
Yeah,
and the San Francisco population is declining. So a lot of these
yeah.
startup founders are moving over here. They're seeing Elon
Well,
Musk set up shop here, and they're like, "All right,
yeah.
that's where I'm going
Well,
now."
yeah, but what had happened was there was a big exodus from San Francisco, but a lot of it went to the peninsula, the North Bay, the East Bay. So it kind of like it went like boom, but it didn't go that far. Like most people just still kind of hung around here. And so
Yeah,
now this void in San Francisco, like it's going to come back up. But a lot of these
yeah.
AI stuff, like stable diffusion, like a lot of it's happening in London and Paris.
Yeah, but
You know,
also like a lot of these AI startups don't require many people at all.
that's true.
So I don't think that there's a
Yeah.
need for office space. Like there's big tech companies in San Francisco that are getting rid of huge office buildings and towers because they just don't have enough people in the office. And
But when you're
if you're
starting
launching
a,
a new startup today, you can do it with three people and keep it three people. Not
I know,
always.
but the thing is that it's not whether or not it's not about it being an AI startup. It's about it being a startup. And
Yeah,
when you're building a new company, you have to be able to establish this level of trust, which means knowing somebody face to face, which means having lunch, having coffee, like you have to be in the same room. Like you're not going to be able
yeah, I agree with that.
to establish the level of trust necessary to go through the friction pain points of starting a new company if you only know them through Zoom. And
Yep.
so you do have people meeting, but they're meeting all up and down the peninsula. But the fact that there's so many people here around San Francisco, it's like once San Francisco gets its shit together, which it will eventually, it's always been a boom and bust city, whether it takes
Yeah.
5 years or 10 years, 15 years, people will come back into San Francisco. They will. But for right now, it is, those face to face meetings, are essential and they're happening all around. But, um, not in San Francisco right now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's brutal downtown, dude.
Ah,
It's
mate, I watch videos of San Francisco downtown, and it looks like they've closed up like 80% of the shops on some streets, like
yeah.
downtown. It's just like a lot of the
Well, and
retail
it is.
stores are just being robbed all the time. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
No, it
wild.
is that bad. It's, people always ask me all the time, they're like, is it really, is it that bad in San Francisco? And I'm like, no, it's worse.
Damn.
Because I'm down there on the streets painting, like I'm down,
Yeah.
like I'm as close to it as you. I mean, I'm in it, It's like I'm down there painting and doing these murals. Like one of the last murals that I did, on Van Ness, Van Ness and Post, like basically Van Ness and Geary, like in the most visible, biggest street in San, in the shit. And there's drug addicts that are keeled over, just and I'm like looking at them and I'm like, oh, this person is going to be dead in a year, like
Mm.
for sure, or maybe 2 years. Like I'm looking at a corpse that's still breathing. Like there's no way out for this person. Like you're never pulling yourself out of this hole. Like the only direction this goes is into death. And so I'm sitting there painting, trying to bring beauty and light and life into it. And I'm like doing it, stepping. Over corpses.
Mm.
And, I mean, it's, it's real. It's absolutely real, man. And,
Well, yeah,
but
I hope that the
that said,
culture,
it'll bounce back.
yeah, I'm hoping that the culture changes enough in the city for it to bounce back. Like, and they're not so infected by this ultra left-wing ideology that just totally destroyed the city in the time I was there. Like, I saw
But
San
that,
Francisco in 10 years just get
yeah.
completely corrupted by this far leftist ideology. And it just
Hmm.
destroyed the great culture of San Francisco that was still it still had reminiscences of the culture of the late 1960s and the hippie
Hmm.
movement. There was a lot of artists still in the city when I first moved there. And then as
Yeah.
soon as all the big tech companies were allowed to move into the city, all the artists couldn't afford to live there anymore.
Yeah.
All the tech companies got infected by the woke far left ideology,
Yeah.
and the culture just fall apart, and it just became like a dead culture. Like everyone was
Hmm.
acting the same. It was very uniform. And there
Yeah.
was
It
that
was all.
sense of anxiety, especially once COVID
Hmm.
picked up. Like it's this sense of fear and anxiety and mistrust between people.
Hmm.
And I don't know how that's going to change in San Francisco. I think it's going to take a while to turn it around, but it's going to start by people like you and San Franciscans fighting against it, speaking up
Yeah.
against it.
I mean, people, you know, a lot of people in San Francisco, I mean, they are good at analyzing data, but not so much when the, the psychological impact of that data is so in their face. Like now that we've,
Yeah.
able to like kind of step away from it a little bit as much, there is a perspective there that people are going to understand. Like, especially now that when you look at all the COVID stuff and you're like, oh, this was all, so much of it was bullshit. Like this,
Yeah.
now they're seeing like, masks were actually like an attack vector for bacteria to spawn, and like
Yeah.
infect people. And you're like, yeah, of course. Because why?
Yeah.
Because bacteria likes warm, dark places that are
Yep.
moist. And you're like, oh yeah, of course. And you're obstructing your breathing. So,
Yep.
and, there's no, uh, respiratory virus in the history of the world that has ever been stopped by masking when you can get air coming in and
Yeah.
out. You're like, of
And
course, like people
renowned
knew this.
doctors during that time were saying that, but we just
Yeah,
ignored them. We're like, oh, they can't be right. That's a conspiracy theory.
right,
Now, 2 years later, we're like, oh yeah, of course.
right. And then now, now it's coming out, now people are actually becoming more familiar with, who Fauci was and what he did in the 80s, with the AIDS crisis and AZT. And then realizing that all this tech censorship was coming out and that they were all wrong and they were being incentivized by big pharma that,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. So, eventually like people are going to look back at this and be like, what the fuck? You
Yeah.
know? I
Yeah.
mean, you listen to that new RFK interview on Rogan and I mean, I was just listening to it and I'm just like fucking
Hmm.
seething because the entire time in San Francisco, it's like from 2 weeks out, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up,
Yeah, yeah.
And then month after month, I was just like, this is fucking bullshit. And everybody's playing, and that shit lasted for 2 years. There's still fucking people walking around San Francisco all over the place wearing masks, cloth masks,
Really?
surgical masks, all over. Like 10%. I would say 1 out of 10. I mean, people are
What?
like, no, seriously, it's all over. All
Damn.
over. I was in Trader Joe's this morning. I counted fucking 20 people with masks on inside.
Yep.
Cloth masks that don't even make sense. Whatever. And but anyways, like people will figure it out. It's just a matter of time. But it's fucking exhausting, dude. It's exhausting.
Yep. I bet, mate.
Yeah. Anyways, you want to wrap it?
Yeah. Sounds like a good spot to
All
wrap.
right. Yeah, yeah. Cool. That was great. I want to keep talking with you about this idea. We should get our own land. We should get a fucking AI robot ranch going.
Love it, mate.
Do a little
It's good.
compound, little art compound. Make art and put it out into the world.
As
The
long as we
AI
do it in
robots.
Texas, I'm down for that.
I might be into that. I don't know. We got to see how the next 5 or so
Hey,
years. I gotta
hey,
make. I gotta make more money.
taxes. Think about how much you'll
Oh,
save on
bro,
income tax.
bro. Offline, I'll tell you someday. You'll be like, "What the fuck, dude?"
All
Yeah, it's
right, mate.
brutal, dude. All
Great
right,
chatting
man.
with you, mate.
All right, all right. I love you. I'll
All
talk to
right,
you
love you
later.
too, dude. See
All
ya.
right. See ya.